The Senkaku Islands are a group of uninhabited islands controlled by Japan in the East China Sea. After it was discovered in 1968 that oil reserves might be found under the sea near the islands, Japan's sovereignty over them has been disputed by the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China, commonly known as Taiwan. Japan controlled the islands from 1895 until its surrender at the end of World War II. The United States administered them as part of the United States Civil Administration of the Ryukyu Islands from 1945 until 1972, when the islands reverted to Japanese control under the Okinawa Reversion Treaty between the United States and Japan.
The American occupation of Japan was based on the notion that the thorough demilitarization and democratization of Japan would make the world forever safe from the renewed threat of Japanese aggression. The document was drafted over the span of only a week's time in-house by American staff and presented to the Japanese government for translation and enactment. The Japanese had no choice but to follow. The 1947 Constitution was readily embraced by the Japanese people and has endured, with not a single amendment over the past 6 decades, as a sound basis for Japan's post-war democracy. The most unique section of the 1947 Constitution is Article 9, often called the No War Clause. Article 9 states that, aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order, the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat of the use of force as means of settling international disputes. In order to accomplish the aim of the preceding paragraph, land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized. The dispute between China and Japan regarding the Senkaku Islands has once again brought Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution to the forefront. Should Japan revise its constitution to allow for an offensive military and collective self-defense, or should it not? Let us look at the problem through the levels of analysis.
Shinzo Abe, the current Prime Minister of Japan, has said he wants to change Japan's anti-war constitution, written by American occupiers after World War II, to allow its defense forces to become a full-fledged military. Analysts said acquiring an offensive weapon would be an important symbolic step away from the limitations placed on Japan's armed forces by the current constitution. He stated that he wants to realize a new constitution that is written by our own hands, and that even if a spy ship loaded with weapons of mass destruction were to come into the Tokyo Bay to attack Japan, we cannot eliminate the ship unless it attacks us. He has also called for strengthening Japan's ability to respond to the continuing dispute with China over uninhabited islands, in which China's ships make almost daily incursions into waters claimed by Japan.
In the domestic level of analysis is the public opinion. The public wants the Prime Minister to improve and focus on the economy instead of focusing on reviving the constitution to change Japan's military that might, in turn, anger the neighboring countries and endanger Japan's economy and security. Certain leaders, such as Hashimoto, the mayor of Osaka, downplay the war crimes committed by Japanese troops during World War II. However, the citizens do not necessarily agree with his sentiment. The Liberal Democratic Party's goal since the 1950s was to remilitarize and to restore Japan's pre-war traditions. The campaign for the constitutional revision prevents wider public debate, and as a result, it has a negative impact on the democracy in Japan because the slogans used by the party are designed to instill a pro-revisionist mood in the public. The Liberal Democratic Party ignores the fact that the pacifist constitution was welcomed by the public and has become deeply rooted in post-war Japan.
Under the interstate level of analysis, there's power. China would keep the status quo if one challenges it. Otherwise, it would now seek to set a new benchmark or redefine the status quo, as it has been doing with regard to the Senkaku Islands. China is basically demonstrating its de facto, at the minimum, co-administration while ever more loudly claiming its sovereign rights to these islands. Next is alliance. Under the US-Japanese Security Treaty, a bilateral alliance, the US maintains nearly 35,000 troops in Japan, with weapons, equipment, and logistical support. Japan pays the US several billion dollars annually to offset about half the cost of maintaining these troops. The alliance was created in 1951 against a potential Soviet threat to Japan. Because of its roots in the US military occupation of Japan after World War II, the alliance is very asymmetrical. The US is committed to defend Japan if it is attacked, but Japan is not similarly obligated to defend the US. The US maintains troops in Japan, but not vice versa. The US belongs to several other alliances, but Japan's only major alliance is with the US.
Japan's constitution
renounces the right to make war and maintain military forces, although interpretation has loosened this prohibition over time. Japan maintains military forces, called the Self-Defense Forces, which are a powerful army by world standards but much smaller than Japan's economic strength could support. Japanese public opinion restrains militarism and precludes the development of nuclear weapons, after Japanese cities were destroyed by nuclear weapons in World War II. Nonetheless, some Japanese leaders believe that Japan's formal security role should expand commensurate with its economic power. At the global level of analysis, the stalemate has already affected the economic relationship between China and Japan. As the second and third largest economies in the world, a deterioration in relations between them could have global repercussions.
Japan and China's growing tensions need to be solved regardless of whether Japan changes its constitution. If Japan does revise its constitution to allow for an offensive military, China will see it as a threat. However, if it does not change, China will use the opportunity to continue using threats of force against Japan. Therefore, Japan and China need to come to some form of agreement to improve their relations, not only for the sake of both countries but also the global economy. With the budget cuts faced by the US on its military spending, Japan should seriously consider revising its constitution to allow for collective self-defense. It would allow Japan to assist the US whether in peacetime, tensions, crisis, or war. This does not mean Japan needs to become militarily aggressive unnecessarily. After all, the UN Charter already states that the state is only allowed the right to belligerency in times of self-defense. In the words of a Japanese military official, "We are changing the constitution, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be seen as a threat."